In our last episode, we finished planking the hull. After 4 months of planking, it felt so good to have accomplished this. We're so close to have a finished planked hull.
We made it, guys!
Summer is ending and fall is slowly making its entrance. The mornings are foggy and the fields around Sunhill Farm are being prepared for the next sow.
So it's Monday, a new week in front of us, and a new phase in the boat build. Since we're finished with the planking, feels so nice. But before we continue working on the boat, I'm thinking it's really time to tidy up in here. The barn looks like a total mess at the moment. There's stuff and tools everywhere, wood chips on the floor, and I don't really like that. It's kind of a fire hazard at the moment. And yeah, I'm thinking we should vacuum the floor and organize everything in here before we do anything else on the boat build. But when that's finished, I'm thinking we should start removing all the screws in the hull, just to prepare the hull for the lamination process.
There is around 3,000 screws and washers in the hull.
Jag kan mäta till det, mamma. Så. Nu. Men den har dött.
Nej, ja, den var ju redan död. Ska de bara? Fastnade.
Titta.
Vera really loves to be in the barn and help out.
Jag ser dig.
Ser du mig?
I removed all the remaining screws and washers, and Johan started sanding.
And once Malin is finished with these screws on the other side, she will join me with the sanding. The plan is to give the whole hull light sand, and then we're going to fill all these holes with thickened epoxy and also all these gaps that we have at the turn of the bilge. And after that, we plan to give the whole hull a light coat of epoxy with rollers, and probably put peel ply on top of that, so that we don't need to sand the hull again once it's time to apply the fiberglass. We have left a row of screws down here and also at the temporary frame in the stern, just to keep the shape of the hull so it doesn't come away from the temporary frames, so that it stays snug against those temporary frames. Maybe it would have done that with just the weight. This is just a precaution. So what we will do is that we will mount some blocks on the inside here and put screws from the inside into the hull to keep it snug, so we can remove this last line of screws as well, and also in the stern. And I know that some of you guys have asked if we're going to do any fairing now before the fiberglass, and we're not. We're going to do all the fairing after the fiberglass is applied. And the reason for that is that once we have all that fiberglass, all those different layers, we will have introduced new unevenness in the hull. So we just figured that it's best to just do all the fairing on top of the fiberglass. It will save us time, otherwise we had to do fairing on the hull 2 times, first now and then later.
Johan marked out squares on the hull, so that we could sand 1 square at a time and remember how much we had done.
So today I'm trying to find the actual line where the transom goes on ROM 3. And it's not very easy, since this line is going in 2 directions. It's bent in that way, but also in this direction. And I'm plotting this from the 3D drawings in the computer, you know, with the laser, different heights, just finding the exact position at different heights. And the reason that this line is bent in 2 directions is because at the center line of the boat, the transom is totally vertical. But out here at the sides, it's reversed, so slightly negative. It's leaning into the boat a little bit. And the reason it is like that is because we want to have a slight curve on the transom. I think it looks nicer, and it also gets a little bit stronger that way. And we need to do this now because we need to cut like a recess all the way across here at the transom, the way we have done here at the shear line, before we can start adding any fiberglass to the hull. And the reason we need to have this recess down here and here at the stern is because of that extra fiberglass that we will add later on to the transom. When that gets folded over to the actual hull, it needs somewhere to go without adding to the thickness of the hull. And it's the same here along the shear line. The fiberglass coming down from the deck later on also needs a pocket to go into. So I will use a router later on to cut this channel all the way across, roughly 100 millimeter wide. I think it will be a slight challenge to control the depth of that recess once we go over the turn of the bilge here. So I just made a rough cut along the temporary frame number 1 here, which the face of that, this side, is the reference face where I'm taking all the measurements from. I tried to make the measurements without doing this rough cut first, but it was kind of complicated. So this will make it a lot easier to get all these points in the correct place.
Our drone has been in for service and is finally back. So here come some shots of Sunhill Farm from above. A few days ago we received 44 tons of gravel, which we will lay out on the inner yard and make a path to the old manure pad. And Vera is helping spreading it out. To make sure that the cut gets straight, Johan uses a piece of wood that he screws down.
So I made a recess cut now on this side until the midline of the hull. It's just under 6 millimeters deep, and that's enough to hide all the layers of fiberglass that we'll have on the hull, together with the layers that we will have later on the transom, together on top of each other without adding to the thickness of the hull. And yeah, I will just clean this up a little bit, and then it's time to do the other side. And it took me quite some time actually to do this, mainly taking all the measurements to really make sure that we have this cut in the correct position, because this line here is actually that's the length of the hull. That's where the transom is going to meet the top sides later on and the bottom part. So later on, once the hull is glassed or has fiberglass on it and it's turned over, this is where we're going to make that cut. And as always, if we are really close to the 3D drawings in reality, we can utilize those drawings a lot better. So I try to make it as good as possible. And I'm pretty confident that we have it in the correct place now. But before I could make all those measurements, I had to check that nothing had moved during the planking process, that we could use the face of this temporary frame as a face of reference for all those points. And that was okay. So yesterday I finished with the recess here at the transom of the boat, and I think it turned out really good. And the plan for today is to do the same at the bow cone of the boat, because we still don't have that recess at deck level that we need up there. So I'm finished with all the cuts for the recess along the edge of the hull now, but I'm still not finished, because this area here, this transition area, it's a bit too sharp, because it's 90 degrees coming in here, and later on when we're applying fiberglass here on the hull over this area, it will be hard to get the fiberglass to conform to that 90-degree angle. And the result will be that we would have an air gap in here, which is not very nice. You want the fiberglass to really stick to the hull at all places. So to try to prevent that, I will use a router to cut this edge at a 45-degree angle. So I will do that also in the transom on top of the hull or at the bottom of the hull. That area will be a bit harder to use the router on, because I can't use any edge as a guide like I can here along the shear line and up here in the bow area. So up back there I might have to use just a hand plane or something like that. So I'm just using this small hand planer to make the angle a bit more shallow. I don't have a more or a shallower router bit, and this is quite okay, just to make the transition even better. And the quality of this cut doesn't really matter. It's just that it needs to be shallow enough to make the fiberglass conform. Later on, once the hull is turned over and everything, and we have glassed over into this recess from the deck as well, we will just use the face of the top sides here as a reference to fair this whole pocket over with epoxy. And it's the same with the recess at the transom. The surface there is pretty rough, since I used a router and it's a bit complicated shape, but that will give a good grip for the epoxy and the fiberglass, so I'll just leave it like it is right now. Doing the last couple of meters with this, and it's really effective. In hindsight, I could have done the whole thing, I'm thinking, with just the planer, but yeah, that's how it is sometimes. So what I have left is the last bit here, and also the transom, and then it's time to start working on the keel pocket or the keel recess to do something similar with the edges up there.
The preparations for laminating continues, and we'll see you again next week. Thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone who contributes to our production.